2020 meeting, Town Hall. It is 7:08, and we will do the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd ask the Finance Director to please call the roll.
Certainly. Mrs. Zoni?
Here.
Mr. Morrison?
Here.
Mr. Bedoin?
Here.
Mr. Pocock?
Here.
Mr. Lebenik?
Here.
And Chairman Leary is absent.
Chairman Leary sends apologies. He is stuck at work. Thank you.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. All right, so there is no public hearing tonight. We will go to agenda item number 4, which is old business, and I'll look for an approval of the December 11th, 2019 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries 5-0. Agenda item number 5 is an audit report presentation, and I would ask either the Finance Director or Town Manager to introduce you, please.
Yes, Scott Bassett is the partner for RSM, and he's going to be presenting the town's audit. And he gave us audit presentation information, so
Thank
we'd
you.
like to utilize that.
Okay. Good evening. For the record, my name is Scott Bassett. I'm an audit partner with RSM. I'm out of the New Haven office. We were engaged by the town of Southerton last spring to come in and conduct the external audit for the town. So it was our first year engagement working with the town and the Board of Ed. So what I tried to put together, typically what I try to do is summarize the report and kind of give you an update of kind of what the highlights of the financial. We could dive into the CAPRA if you like, but I try to go through and highlight some of the key items that I see that usually might be unusual from one year to the next, and kind of what our job is and the responsibility of management as we go through the process. So that little handout is just a summary, but we certainly can dive into the details. I've tried to reference the pages if we wanted to go there as you dive into the details if you'd like. So our audit scope, we give opinions on the financial statement itself and also on your federal and state awards. We rendered unmodified clean opinions on the statements this year, which was typical for your past auditors. Just to give you an idea of our scope and how we went through the process, we probably spent man-hours about 750 to 800 man-hours on the job. I'm sure Amelia wished it was more like 600, but that's what it took us to get through the engagement the first year. Typically the first year there's a big learning curve both on the firm side and on the town side. So we went through that process. We were able to issue the report mid-December, about the same time period you had done in the past. So we filed the report with all the federal and state agencies as required. As we go, there's some required communications that I have to give to you as your external auditor to the Board of Finance acting as the audit committee. There were no unusual or significant accounting policies pronouncements issued during the current year. There were 2 new accounting standards, but they had no impact, on the financial statements for the town. In the CAPRA itself, there are some significant estimates that are embedded in the amounts and the numbers that are presented. Cost sharing plan assumptions, the MERS plan, something that you as management really don't control. They control it at the state level with that state plan. And there are some significant assumptions in there. In fact, the state did change a couple of those assumptions in the current year, which drove some numbers, drove the numbers as you compare to last year significantly higher. The biggest change was in the decrease in the discount rate, going from 8% to 7%, which really increased your portion of net pension liability at the state level. I believe they were funded at a 90% level over the old assumptions, and they dropped down to about 79% level under the new assumptions as they went through that process. The OPEB assumptions, something similar. Not so much driven by the discount rate because you don't have investments with your OPEB liability. So those are really measured at your treasury rates, which is about 3.5%, and no significant changes there. Your risk management fund, I guess you just had a meeting about that. So your IBNR numbers are calculated by the insurance. Yes.
I just had a quick question. Amelia, that rate that he mentioned as, you said it was 7%?
7%, yes.
Is that the rate that's slowly trickling down to 5% over a number of years that we talked about like a year ago?
The MERS is, I think that right now that the table that they presented us is just going from 8% to 7%, but there's talk about them going down further.
There's a very old report from 2011, I believe, where there was a discussion that you should eventually get the numbers down to 5%. But it was never really acted on until, as you know, last year the legislature acted for the first time.
It should actually have been done at a slower pace.
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah, 1% hit in 1 year is a big hit and on these big of a plan. So I was kind of surprised when they did that, but it did drop by a full percentage point. It's low risk management, which is the IBNR that calculates out, and then there's depreciation on your capital assets. Those are the big estimates that are embedded in the financial statements. During the audit, we had no difficulties as we went through the process. Everything we asked for was given to us as we both here at the Board of Ed. We had no disagreements with management, and this was one of the big things that I think is important as a new auditor coming in. Is we had no uncorrected misstatements, and I think more than that is although we had a few audit adjustments, it really is a reflection of the information that you're getting on a monthly basis, how accurate it is as you make your decisions. So coming in as new auditors, we always take a hard look at that. So one of the things, and I had never worked with Amelia before, but what her and her staff do is really put together some sound numbers and put some diligent work into that. So we really didn't have any significant audit adjustments as we went through the process. We did have a finding this year, and it's probably just a non-recurring finding. You know, as we started looking at some revenue cycles in the sewer fund, you had some unbilled usage. Basically, you had earned some money by June 30th, and it was billed out July 15th or later. So we had to do a calculation to say, really, was that earned as of June 30th, just because the billing cycle overlapped. So that was an adjustment for about $850,000 that was made. Probably not material in the whole nature of things, but the way GASB splits up the fund, for that particular fund, it was material. So we had to restate for that amount. If it was in a bigger fund, probably would not have done that, but just based on some GASB calculations and materiality, it warranted a restatement for $850,000 to the good. You had some revenue earned that we had just had to record as of that period, as of June 30th, that cutoff period. Management did not consult with any other accountants, and management signed a representation letter basically saying everything we had asked for was correct and everything was given to us with no problem. Turning to that, the responsibilities of management is really to prepare the financial statements, and our responsibilities as your external auditor is to give an opinion on the financial statements stating that they're materially correct and in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. I think we both accomplished our duties in doing that in the current year. As I mentioned, all three reports received clean opinions, unmodified opinions on the financial statements. So those are my required communications. I was going to go into some of the financial statement results now, if you'd like me to do that.
Please.
Yep.
Okay. So the statement really is comprised of three bases of accounting. You have your full accrual basis of accounting. You have your modified accrual basis of accounting, which is the budgetary accounting that you see monthly, and again, then the budget to actual. So the big difference between your modified accrual and your budgetary are some state on behalf payments that you receive on the GAAP basis, in addition to some encumbrances that are coming in and out. On the full accrual is something you probably see once a year, and that's GASB requires that you pull in all your fund statements that bring them from a modified accrual basis of accounting to a full accrual basis of accounting, and you're really accounting for your long-term assets and your long-term liabilities. On that basis of accounting, the net position is about $205 million, and total net position in the governmental activities was $143.7, and your business type activities, which is your sewer fund, and was about $61.7. The governmental activities actually had a decrease of about $10 million in the current year. That's a big number, right? What really drove that number was the drop in the net pension liability that came from the MERS statement. Your liability really went up quite a bit based on that calculation. And the sewer fund had an increase of about $5.3 million in the current year from a full accrual basis of accounting. The numbers that you look at and that you use for your budget purposes is really your general fund for the current year. At the end of the year, the general fund unassigned fund balance increased by $2.6 million, and while the total fund balance increased by 3.5. The number I'm sure you talk about each year is the percent funded as a base to revenue, and that was at 16.1% as of June 30th, 2019. That's your major fund, and I'd be happy to answer some questions about that if you'd like.
No, the only question I had with regarding the 16%, based on your experience of other municipalities, where does that fall in? Is that a very high, which is a good number? Or where do you see
I get this
that?
question every time I do a presentation. Usually have a standard
Since
answer.
we don't know what other towns are
No, I
really-
would say, here, my philosophy about fund balance, and I've been doing this a long time, if you looked at the GFOA, they'd calculate your fund balance at be like 3 months of expenditures, so that's much higher than the 16.1. But if you go to the rating agencies, they would go somewhere between, they'd probably like to see 10 to 20%. My view on that is you look at your budget. I think the budget drives the percentage itself because dollars, whether it be a natural disaster, those dollars could be eaten up, whether you're a big city or so. I would say taking the size of Southington and in that 10 to 20% range, I'd say you're right in the middle, and your budget's probably right in the middle. So I wouldn't say you're overly aggressive or underfunded at all. I'd say you're probably right where you probably want to be based on those ranges, but obviously someone could have a different opinion of me than I do, but I think that's probably what I see in the community, and to maintain your bond rating and your reserves are also very important factors, and they do look at that.
Yeah,
So I think the bigger thing, and I think, is managing that fund balance. If that's your level, no one wants to see peaks and valleys, but if you're managing it where you have an unexpected revenue one year, maybe you're just managing it to a lower rate. If you have a revenue source that you lose, whether it be state funding, you're managing to another thing. I think that's getting in that comfort zone and managing to a level.
Oh, that's an important point, and I think our town manager and Amelia do a very good job managing that percentage over the
Right.
last 10 years since
Yeah.
I've been on the board.
Yeah,
So-
it makes a big difference, So I'm sure it wasn't a surprise to you, but that would be my answer to that.
I agree with what you said.
Okay. We mentioned the Sewer Enterprise Fund had an increase of $5.3 million in the current year, driven by some capital grants. Your Internal Service Fund, your Health Insurance Fund maintains a strong reserve, and that increased by about $850,000 during the current year. Actually, I didn't know you were having that meeting beforehand, before we came in, but that's one of the funds that, as I go through the process and go through a lot of communities, that's the fund that I think the Board of Finance should be involved in, seeing what the trends are, see how it's rolling from year to year, because it doesn't take a whole lot to deplete one of those funds. So being knowledgeable of that and being kept abreast of where that fund is certainly a good idea. Long-term debt, your long-term debt did decrease in the current year, just your general obligation bonds, but the town was able to take advantage of some favorable interest rates and entered into about a $7 million refunding, where they were able to recognize an economic gain of about $560,000. So that market's drying up a little bit as far as the refunding market goes, so you're able to get in there and save some money based on that refunding. The notes to the financial statements themselves, very consistent to being presented in the prior years. No big changes from the format that was presented to us. But the notes I would like to talk to is Note 7. And Note 7 is your long-term liabilities. And I mentioned a couple of these we touched on. We mentioned the debt decrease in your general obligation bonds, but the two big items that really increased was your OPEB. Your total OPEB liability increased to about $3 million, and the net pension liability increased to about $38 million from the previous year. So that took a jump of about maybe $30 million, and you're not seeing the full effect of it this year. You're seeing a big part of it, but when the actuaries change the assumptions, you defer those in, so they're kind of blended in over a 4 or 5 year period. So you're going to see those go up from year to year. the IBNR, your health insurance funds, the claims actually were very consistent to what they were in 2018, about $21 million from each year, and your IBNR is about $1.5 billion. So IBNR usually measures between 30 and 35 days of claims as you go through the process. Fund equity, just a scenario of that. We talked about the major one being the general fund. Your capital project fund had a planned use of fund balance during the year as you drew down from some bonds that were issued in previous years, and you have a plan to replenish that with some additional bonds here in 2020. We talked about the OPEB liability. We talked about the employee retirement system. There are some pending GASB statements that I will mention, and two are important. One is GASB 84, which has to do with fiduciary funds. And fiduciary funds, basically right now, it's an in and out, and they're not measured on an income statement level. And your main fiduciary funds would be over at the Board of Ed, these student activity funds. So the accounting for those might be a little bit different in 2020. And the next one, which may have an impact at your water department or your sewer department, is a lease standard. Basically, there's no such thing as an operating lease any longer. It's all capital leases, so you'll be bringing those capital assets on and bringing those on and depreciating those. From a budgetary standpoint, revenues exceeded budget by $1.3 million, and expenditures were lower than budget by $3.3 million in the current year. Those are the highlights, but the report is about 200 pages long in three sections. You have a transmittal letter that's drafted by management. Following that, you have a management discussion and analysis, and really management puts that together. And I always direct people, before jumping into the 200-page document, to read those two letters, because that tells really in a narrative format what's happened in the town. And most of the financial highlights that I just went over in my presentation are presented in that narrative format, and then you can dig deeper into the details. And those are both very well written. And that's where I go as I try to summarize things, and I might add some flavor to it. That's where all the information is. So instead of jumping through the 200 pages, there's probably 10 pages of a narrative you could read through and get a good idea of what's happened in the town for that fiscal year. And the transmittal letter will also offer things that future long-range planning and those type of ideas. So a good little summary there. I did say that the town did get federal and state money during the year. The town received about $3.2 million of federal dollars, and we were required to test one major fund in the federal single audit. That was a special education cluster, and we did not have any findings related to that. From the state side, the town received about $30 million, $30.6 million, and we tested 4 programs there, and we were able to issue clean opinions on those financial statements. So that is our presentation, but I really want to echo that, the records presented to us were in very, very good order. We received full cooperation as we went through the process, and we were able to issue the report on time. Amelia did go through, we did have some turnover during the year, so it was a little bit more painful than a first-year audit had to be, but we did get through it, and we were able to issue mid-December, which is consistent with what you issued in prior years. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have or go into further detail of anything in the CAFR.
I had a question. What would you say your overall assessment on the internal controls tested throughout the audit?
Well, I think we do a big dive into internal controls based on our methodology. We saw the appropriate amount of checks and balances as we went through it from both we break it down through procurement, vendor payables, payroll, both at the board side and at the town side. And then we look at your major revenue sources, where your charges for services, your tax collector, intergovernmental, obviously. And as we went through it, we did not see anything that would warrant a comment regarding to bring to the board that was of concern. Now, we don't opine on the internal controls, but we certainly go through them based on Yellow Book practices, and we spend a lot of time with that, and we didn't see anything that came up that would warrant a management comment as we went through it. There might be suggestions as we go through, but both at the town side and the board side, we thought there were strong controls.
Yeah.
Tony, do you have something?
Yeah, just the actual expenditures on the budget 3,386,000.
Yes.
How did that break down between the school system and general government?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry. How did the actual expenditures under budget, which is over 3 million, how did that break down between the school system and general government?
The Board of Ed returned, this is on page 74 of the
Oh,
CAFR,
sorry, you got it.
971,000, and the balance was from town operations.
Yeah, because last time I saw that figure, we were told 600,000.
Correct, because I can address that. The 600, basically the balance they had in their operating account, they requested in their non-lapsing amount. The rest of the funds that you see there are capital projects that we put under their department
Right.
that we carry forward. So all the funds that were left over were actually carried into New Year, either for capital purposes or for the non-lapsing account.
Yep. That's how it's presented there in 74 too.
Yeah.
Anything else? Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so we'll move to agenda item number 6, and maybe just ask the finance director to cover 1 and 2 together, which is a review of revenues and expenses versus budget.
Correct. Revenues, our prior year taxes are about 40,000 above budget. Building permits and fees, 150,000 above budget. Interest on investments, 300,000 above budget. And town clerk fees, 60,000 over budget for a total of 550,000. Obviously, there's other accounts that have smaller variances, but those are the main ones. Expenditure-wise, I think there's no major issues with any of the accounts currently that we haven't. There might be a few requests for transfers that they'll be coming before us, especially for finalized contracts and maybe some snow. Yeah.
Well, we don't
Not-
hope to transfer that until we
Yeah,
deal with it
hopefully
much
not.
later on.
Yeah.
So far, Mother Nature's been pretty
So
good.
far, so good. Yes, exactly.
Any questions for anybody? Revenues or expenses?
Capital projects, I'm going to ask you to give me a month's delay, and I will do my best to get it done for next month.
That works. Okay, we'll go
Sorry.
to the subcommittee reports. Sewer committee is Mr. Morrison.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. The plant upgrade was the biggest thing, as it always is. It's 55% complete now. And we've had 37% contract time expended. So that's all good. We've paid off, I should say we authorized a change order of $52,000 for 3 separate items, which we tended to put them together into one, so we don't end up, having too much paperwork. That's put us to 1.48%, which of the 5% that we're allowed to go for the contingency. So you're 55% done, and you're way under the contingency from a proportionate, percentage. So that's good news. We authorized $24,500 expenditure for Ty and Bond, who are doing various services for us in terms of review and looking at the project. And that was to take on a project to do with training. They suggested video would be a far more rugged approach for training, and we agreed to give them the money to do that. That's still got to go to DWP because it's part of their grant that they gave us. You have to train on the plant, so that should be okay. The Blatchley pump station was the second thing. Replacement for the gravity sewer line is underway, the actual replacement for it, and we authorized, again, $24,500 for Ty and Bond to do some various work on that. In terms of the getting rid of the actual pump station itself once it's been replaced with the gravity sewer line. There was a development after that, which we've just got essentially a letter on where to essentially pay for it. The suggestion is to take the money out of contingency, the town, and move it into the sewer fund. And there's a letter it's the letter that was given to us that describes that. So I'd rather turn it over to the town manager. I can talk about it, but it's probably better coming from you.
Yeah, well, it's nothing surprising. We knew we were going to be doing this, and as we talked about before, everything got a little bit pushed forward. So in this particular case, you've already approved the design for Ty and Bond to design how it's going to be demolished. Now, this is actually giving us permission to go out to bid. From a funding standpoint, we felt, and obviously the sewer committee felt, that there was sufficient amount in contingency. Now, this is sewer contingency. This isn't general fund contingency. There was sufficient amount to handle it in that part of it. So I would ask two things. Number one, that it be put on. It's not on the agenda, right?
Right, it
No,
needs to be
it has
added to the
put on the
agenda.
agenda at the end of the agenda for action. And what happens is, and this will take place, obviously, after the gravity sewer line is in place, because obviously we need the station, which we're using as a very large pump. It's actually a pool we're using to pump material out of it. So once the gravity line is in, we will then do that particular job. But the most important part is we want to go out to bid as quickly as possible so we can get a contractor ready to go when we're ready. I know that they're talking about April is when the gravity line is going to be finished. It may be done before, but obviously we predict April, and if it's earlier, no one's going to complain about that. So we want to be in the position. So we felt that from myself, Amelia, that the best place to take it out of was to be contingency for the sewer fund.
And what is in that, what's the balance of that contingency, or what's in there?
I'm not even, I think we had a pretty healthy contingency, bear with me. 200, we had
256, right?
286, 493. I think we already used 100,000.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a healthy number for the sewer fund.
So do we, I guess,
Add it to
a
the
motion to
agenda
add it to
first.
the agenda? Okay.
Yeah, at the end, yeah, as number 4, if you could
Someone make a
take a
motion?
vote.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer.
Or
Add it
no,
to the
to add to the
agenda.
agenda, sorry.
Add it to the agenda as item 4.
4.
I'll second that.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries 5-0, so it'll be agenda item number 4
Yes.
under manager's memos. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Morrison?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Okay, Public Works is Mr. Pocock and Mrs. Zoni.
There were actually quite a few things this time that involved cash in the Public Works Committee, and I'll try to take them in the order they arose. We had a presentation first from Bristol Resources Recovery and Recycling, and that their costs are going up, and this was about hazmat recycling. In the past, several years back, Southington hosted one of the hazmat recyclings, and it had been hosted other years previously. There is a cost associated with anyone from the community who does bring their materials to recycle, and the town pays for that cost, whether it's held in this town or whether it's held in another community and our people go there. In the town, we want to encourage people to recycle things safely and according to the laws, and not just dump them any old place or hide them in a plastic bag and try to bring them to Bulky. So it was suggested that we try to add recycling, hazmat recycling to Southington and actually have a location in our community in the future. This, of course, would require funds, because if it's in your community, more people participate. As the numbers showed in previous years, when when it was held in Southington, we had a lot of people that participated. When it's held in other communities, some people do, but not nearly as many. So the cost would go up. It would involve having some of our town employees, a couple of them be there on site to help handle materials and move them around. It would primarily be run, however, by the Bristol Recycling Agency. it was a consensus that was reached on the committee that it would be moved to the town council, but it will have a financial impact if it is held in this town. And the anticipated number is approximately $17,000 to add to the budget to hold it in our community, whereas it's about $8,400 last year that we paid to another community for people that brought the recycling to another community. So it's about double the cost to hold it here, but a lot more people participate. So that's was advised to go to the council. I believe it either did or will, I'm not sure.
If I may, yeah, what happens is that it's part of the budget process.
Right.
You may or may not be aware, we belong to a region, so you'd have to fit this into the region. They like to do them twice a year. They like to do them in the spring, they like to do them in the fall. Of course, there's always summer dates available, but nobody, you don't want to hold it, have all that expense, and not have a lot of people show up. So right now, I've been working with the health director and Mark Bodman, who's our director of our district, and we're probably going to get a date in November of '21 because they schedule these far in advance. So that won't technically be an issue in this particular budget, but it'll be in the next budget.
Yeah, the next budget. Another item that will likely go into the next budget, but I'm not sure, that'll depend on discussions in Mark's office. People from the building department came to discuss their needs with the Public Works Department in a digital system to digitize all property records. Because when people go to the building department, it takes the staff there a very long time to gather all the necessary materials for all of the individual FOI requests that come into the department. So they're looking to get equipment and materials so that all records can be digitized. They anticipate a first-year cost of approximately, I think it was $70,000, and that cost, they said, would not be there in future years, although as technical equipment goes, things always need to be upgraded and kept up. Somebody's got to maintain them. So there's always an upgrade and maintenance cost involved, and somebody has to enter information. But they're looking to do that. It was my suggestion that they move that to meeting with the town manager to go into their budget discussions for the future budgets, because it's not something that you just do out of the clear air in the middle of the year. Another thing that came up was that PFAS, we're all hearing about these PFAS chemicals that are being let out every time there's a fire with the fire retardant chemicals. It's getting into the waterways, it's polluting things. So the town building department said that the cost to actually administer the test right now is about $300,000, and the device itself costs about $120,000. So it will work. They're looking to get grants to try to offset these costs. This is in preliminary stages at this time, so there is no cash outlay at this time, but it's something that may have to go into future budgets, so it will likely anticipate a problem at some time in the future or anticipate extra costs. And the last thing that affects cash outlay is leaf collection. There was just a discussion that's been brought up as to whether the town should switch to bagging with recyclable bags versus the VACOL. It was indicated that there are other towns that are doing the bagging and that it saves money. And then there's another discussion on the other side of it that we use union personnel, then it impacts that, and we don't have all the equipment in this town to do that as would need to be done. So we'd have to lease or rent the equipment to do this, or buy it at some point in the future. So it was suggested that the building departments and road departments research what other towns are doing, get some actual dollar amount information and bring it back to Public Works. How much are they actually saving, and what would it cost if we had to put this into effect? Other than that, there was nothing for Public Works this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any
Thank you,
questions? Okay, open space, Mr. Pocock?
I know there's activity. I had a little mix-up in my calendar here for last week, and Sue knows that. But there is activity coming down the lane, so
Okay.
that'll be something down the road.
I could just add one thing to that. You probably read it in the paper already, but the town did receive an $86,000 open space grant. And we'll obviously discuss the properties that the open space committee and the council are discussing, but that's good news. I mean, obviously, we haven't had open space money freed up on the state level for many, many years. So it's good that Southington was part of, I believe, the $26 million package. We received $86,000.
Thank you.
That's great. Self-insurance, we just had the meeting just before this meeting, so we are 6 months through the fiscal year now, so we have results through December. December was a good month. We were $98,000 under budget. For the year, for this fiscal year, we are, I think, $35,000 over budget. So essentially on budget, kind of that $35,000 on 10.6 year to date. We had budgeted, I think it's also just good to look at kind of how we're trending and where we stand versus prior. So our budget for this fiscal year was a 6.1% increase versus last year. And year to date, we are under that. We're at a 5.6% increase year to date. So, as we say all the time, insurance is unpredictable. 6 months through the year, I think we are essentially on budget, so I think Amelia so far has nailed the budget, and we'll see how we do the second 6 months of the year. We do have, Mr. Schode and I were talking before, I think, 2 more self-insurance committee meetings coming up, at which we'll review the upcoming budget for the upcoming fiscal year, and we would, I guess, determine if we took any action on the level of funding, but there's nothing to report there other than the fact that that will be something that will be discussed at the next 2 budget meetings, or next 2 self-insurance committee meetings, which obviously has an impact on the budget. Anything else? No. Okay. The chairman's not here. I don't know if the town manager wants to update.
There was no meeting last month.
There was no meeting? Okay.
I do have a quick
please.
question on self-insurance. Actually, it's more towards the town in the sense of, obviously, you want to keep employees all healthy so they don't, claims. What kind of wellness programs do we have for our employees?
Several. The most important, which is the financial wellness program, which is most unions have what's called the 2-point carrot. If they have their physical, they and everyone on their insurance policy have a physical every year, they get 2 points off their premium share. So that's the huge part, because money talks. And we're very, I wish I could say every employee took advantage of that, because we pay for it's a free physical. You save money. Other than that, other than me picking them up in my car and driving them to their doctor, I'm not sure what more we can do about that. But there's people, but the vast majority of them do that, and I'm sure all of you are aware that is rule number 1 when it comes to wellness. Get your physical done every year, and of course, the ladies have other things that are required to do, but that's the big part about that part of it. So the second part is that we run several programs. I haven't been in the last couple, but we're running. I believe it's yoga. Is it yoga or that other one? Losing weight. There's the biggest loser. We're doing the biggest loser right now because everyone comes into my office.
We have about 150 people participating.
I wish I was one of them, but I didn't have enough time. But anyway, so that's one, and then we have yoga, and I apologize, there's another, it's called yoga, and then there's something else too. What's the other one called? Anyway, we have 2 of those classes that are starting up also.
We have a wellness committee that kind of oversees and people who kind of oversee and come up with programs. Zumba, there you go, very important. Will you be attending that one?
Some of the schools do individual things as well. When I was at the high school, there were many individualized programs there that a group of people would organize, and there were a lot of staff participation.
Yeah.
Well, we try and do it jointly. Obviously, the BOE has the same wellness program we have, and they also have the programs of the exercise programs, and they're part of, it's one big biggest loser for the whole town.
Well, I'd really like to get that.
Sorry you asked the question, Tony.
No, I was curious. It seems like it. Okay. So we're doing
We do have.
Right, great. Thanks.
Just, I guess, to make sure it makes it in the minutes, the town manager is willing to pick up anybody and drive them for their physical.
For their annual physical.
Yes, let's make sure that makes it into the minutes. Okay. All right, so we'll go to the investment committee, Mr. Budon.
Yep. In addition to what Amelia mentioned earlier on the status of the town's financial results, as of December 31st, we had approximately $72 million in cash and investments. And as you know, that changes weekly. Because that's used for operating expenses, short and long-term expenses. Of the 72 million, 16.6 million are invested in 1 to 5 year CDs, and which is about approximately 23% of the 72 $2 million, which is a good percentage of being invested in securities. And those securities are earning about 2.4%, and it was higher, but as people may or may not know, the Federal Reserve has lowered the interest rate 3 times in the last 7 months, so that affects the CD rates. And of the $16.6 million, there's 71 CDs, and they have an average maturity of 2.4 years. And that's it.
That's good. Thank you. Any questions? Do we have anything for the liaison of the Board of Fire Commissioners, Mr. Pocock or Mr. Bedoin?
Well, I don't know what Kevin's got. They had a recruitment policy going, and fortunately, they got 13 people signed up. Now, they would not be ready to go until around October, but amazingly enough, we also have 2 women in that section. So, also, the overtime is coming down, and some of it's due to 2 new firefighters come on board, going from there. So that's all helping as far as I go. Kevin, you got it?
No, I was going to say the same about the recruits. The recruiting committee's doing a good job. That's
There's-
the highest percentage in 10 years.
It's the highest class that I can
Highest
recall.
class.
Oh, yeah, I tell, and they're still working at it. I mean, they haven't given up either. So.
No, the subcommittee of the fire board is doing an excellent job
Yeah.
with that.
Did they explain why it worked, Ed? Was it just by virtue of doing an aggressive recruiting program? Was that it?
They've been out there. I mean,
Yeah.
they're on the green here. It's really aggressive. They're firehouses.
And I know they were at the Apple Harvest Festival. so
They're
you're
at
able-
a
you're able to-
Christmas night, because I was at one of the firehouses.
Yeah.
They're out there recruiting. They've been doing a lot of recruiting at events. They have a table
really-
set up, and they're just talking to people.
It's good to see the signups, and like I say, be October by the time they hit
that's good.
ground running there. But that's a good thing, really is, and appreciate the people that did sign up. That's about all I got, and Kevin's got the same. So we're good.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other committees, so we'll do board communications.
I have one item, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Please.
Over the several years ago, you allowed me and the Economic Development Coordinator to put $75,000 a year into his budget to do a program for Beaton and Corbin. I'm happy to say that over a 7 or 8 year period, we've been very patient, and you may have read that we signed what's called the tripartite agreement. I signed it yesterday. We passed the council on Monday, which allows us to start the development process for the Beaton and Corbin property, which you all know is kind of a gateway coming south onto Route 10. I'm not saying it's going to be developed tomorrow, but all the pieces are now in place, and all the parties have signed an agreement with their obligations, and this is as exciting as it's gotten for that property, certainly since I've been working for the town.
That's great.
It's good to hear.
It'll be great to get that back on the rolls.
Cleaned up.
And cleaned up, absolutely.
We have a couple of things. Anybody else?
Do we know how much work is involved in the cleanup? Because
Approximately $1 million.
$1 million.
Yeah, it's coming. If you want me to go, it's coming from several different sources. The town has pledged $150,000.
Okay,
A lot of that has already been spent
Yeah,
toward the
right.
studies. The prospective owner has already got $150,000 plus a $400,000 loan that he's getting from the Naugatuck CROG, and then the state is kicking in the rest of it. So it's been when you get the town, 2 separate parties, and the state involved, it takes a lot of patience to get an agreement together. So.
In time.
And
Time, yeah. I'm fine.
Okay, a couple things. Number one, I think first and foremost, just to welcome the finance director back. So thank you very much. It's great to have you here. Number two, I think, and you've done this in the past, I think it's been a couple of years, I remember for the budget presentation for the insurance portion, can you provide a detail of all the insurance policies we're buying, the insurance company, the limits, the effective dates of premium we're paying, that kind of just provides the details of what's in our budget?
Yep,
And then,
absolutely.
I know we spoke about this before as well, too, is can you also provide details, and it can even be an update at a budget meeting, doesn't necessarily have to be anything in writing, but in terms of our cyber insurance and specifically what coverage we have for network extortion or ransomware. I think obviously everybody knows that's it's a significant issue that's impacting the insurance industry. It's expected to get worse. And I don't know, by the way, if whoever we're purchasing our insurance for, or if we do anything in terms of any type of testing, or, for ransomware attacks. You can send out, or any type of phishing attacks, you can send out, to your employees, fake phishing exercise attacks, and just any type of education that we're giving our employees to, help avoid phishing, network extortion, ransomware type attacks and exposure that we have, because it's obviously it's kind of a real threat. It could have a financial impact for us, and I don't know that we're doing anything, and I don't know who we're purchasing our insurance from, but it's certainly out there and resources are available.
Right. Well, we go through KERMA for our LAP now, liability, auto, and property, and we have cyber insurance, but they're actually purchasing it from a third party. They have their own, but it's more of like a pooled insurance, which I wasn't comfortable with, so we're buying separate insurance through a third party, through them.
Separate cyber and privacy?
Yes, cyber. I'd have to look at the specifics, but I could send that to you.
Yeah, I think, and again, you don't necessarily have to send it. I just think even if we have a discussion about it, I think even with that, we want to just be careful about anything we're putting in email. So
Right.
if we can have a discussion, but again, it would, I think, specifically just be with respect to the coverage for network extortion and ransomware. I think would be important for us to look at. And then I would be interested again in if our insurance company would offer any type of training.
They do. Kermit.
On that specifically, though, do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Kermit has specialized training that we've sent both our IT guys to, and I think the BOE has also sent their IT people to.
Okay.
And to answer your second question, I'm not aware we've performed a check yet.
Yeah.
But that's a good idea, and I'll talk to the IT division on how they feel about that. But I know that at least, I can't say 3 or 4 times they've gone updating their training toward this, because the insurance companies are very serious about making sure the IT division knows everything that's going on, because that's the front line. So.
Yeah, I mean, not surprisingly, you'd imagine. I mean, municipalities are very poor cyber risks as a class of business. And that being said, obviously, I think just the kind of what you see from a trending standpoint in how, again, ransomware attacks and payments are impacting not just municipalities, but kind of all classes.
Our neighbor.
Yeah,
Yes.
Exactly. So it's
And in the newspaper, and I know
significant.
that our neighbor has been hit, I think, more than one occasion.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And we do back up information to an off-site, so it's,
Which is good. There are, just so you know, I mean, obviously there are then, data restoration costs,
Yeah.
the time you're down. So it's not a good problem to have. So as long as, I guess I look at it, as long as we feel, we're properly insured, and then also I would think this would be something where we'd probably want to just lean into staff training and making sure we're using all the resources available to us.
Well, like Joe mentioned, a lot like the insurance companies, they put millions of dollars and they get hacked.
yes.
And municipalities don't have the resources to do that. And what they'll do, a lot of times, they'll have a third party come in and try and hack into their systems.
Right.
Or they have a cyber audit. Have you ever thought of having a cyber audit, or a third party come and see how weak or how strong our IT is with related
There's
to cyber?
there's multiple agencies that will do that.
Yeah.
I believe that Bloom was offering that before we left and went to RSM.
I mean, it's good to do it once at least.
I believe that the police department's utilizing a company that would be willing to do that, something like that. We've been kind of looked at it.
CCM and Kerma also do that. So, yeah, there's ways to do that. To answer your question, that has not been done
Right.
yet.
But it's something that's been on the radar.
I would like to see it considered, because on my town email, I got one of those, and I forwarded it to Rick Lapatowski just a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
here in my sent file. Yeah.
Yeah, we do get, it's interesting how some of those make it through,
they
there
look
are
so real.
phishing, yeah.
Yeah.
But we try to make people aware of the fact that, if it's not someone you know, you don't open it, you don't
Yeah.
open any attachments attachments.
There's never enough training in that.
Yeah.
So
No, it's just getting worse, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and again, this is something that could have a financial impact to us. But in terms of, I think, kind of, I guess, if possible, what would be, we can have a broader discussion. That will be detailed in writing. Would be just kind of an overall insurance view that just lines up with what the budget line item is in whatever you present. I think that was it. Okay. Go to public communications.
Yeah, that would be, that would be very quick.
We will very quickly close public communications. I don't think there's anything correct on our strategy.
Nope.
Okay. All right, so we'll go to the consent agenda. I believe we can take it in full.
Yeah.
There's a motion.
Yep, clear.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as a group.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We'll go to manager memo number 1, which is a transfer, $12,113 for fire and snow removal. Is there any?
Brief explanation. The companies that used to do the plowing, they're few and far between now because of the public safety buildings, the requirements that we put on them. A lot of them won't do it anymore. So there's only a few left. So this one, the one we had to get for the fire stations went up. And that's what this is.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to do the transfer for $12,113 for the fire department snow removal.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. Discussions?
Well, it's definitely getting expensive. It's not just the fire department, it's the police department too.
Yeah, well, that's
That's coming, it's
those
gonna
are
come
those are
out.
very difficult, and the library to a lesser extent because of the requirements there.
Yeah, it's just something that's, but even the requirements, you gotta have them requirements.
You can't just make a sweep through the police and fire department
No,
and leave.
just don't.
You have to
Yeah.
keep going back,
Yeah.
especially on a long-term storm. They could be out there
But I-
10 times.
I'm just bringing that up, it's not something we can get around.
And
Okay,
although
I'm good.
we do in bad storms close municipal buildings, I have yet to close the police or fire departments, so,
Or Public Works?
or public works, right? But they plow their own.
I'm
too.
good, Joe, I don't extend it.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Our motion carries 5-0. Next is agenda item number 2, which is a $1,600 transfer, highway parks, boot and foul weather gear, and $10,000 highway and parks meal allowance.
This is, we changed the structure with the collective bargaining agreement. The meal allowances are, instead of the reimbursement aspect of it, which was highly administrative, both Amelia's department as well as Public Works, we changed it now. So in this particular case, this is pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement, which was agreed upon.
Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve $1,600 for highway and parks, boot and foul weather, $10,000 of highway and parks meal allowance pursuant to the contract.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Go to agenda item number 3, which is a $120,373 transfer. This is for the Board of
Yeah,
Education
additional-
with the additional MERS.
If you remember how we did it, we kept it a little separate because we didn't know how MERS was going to take place, and we knew we were going to be doing this, so we're recommending the transfer to the operating budget of the BOE.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion, second, quick discussion. This is not completely related to this, but I just think that this will be a topic of discussion. I think when we're looking at the Board of Education budget, I think because as presented, they've got the additional MERS and then the, what's the other one? The
TRB.
TRB, also kind of a separate to get back. So I just think that when we get the Board of Education budget, we're going to kind of see 3 numbers.
It's the middle number.
It's the middle number.
It's the 3.11
No,
number.
it is, and again, that's kind of a discussion with the finance director. I know, speaking to her, she has spoken to you.
Spoke to me, yeah. If you wanted me to explain why I recommend doing it that way, it's because the TRB will not be going into the Board of Education budget. The legislature, I believe, is not going to be bringing that up, so that'll stay separate. And then this board, the town council, with our recommendation, will see what to do with the TRB money. I know I've mentioned to you already, it's probably going to be, recommending it going into the roads in the spring. That in mind, the money for MERS has to go into the BOE, so that goes into their budget for their calculations. So
Yeah.
we all agreed that that was the best way to go.
I agree. Just so you know, I mean, that was a conversation last night at the Board of Education Budget Workshop. I do think it was, to the finance director's point, I think you agreed, it was important to have that number included because then it trues up to our prior budget. But, and by the way, I know we'll discuss this again, and I'm sure it'll be, when the Board of Education presents their budget, a topic of discussion. But I think it's just worth it to mention in case we see anything in the papers or the first time that we see the budget, we're going to see those three items, or those three separate lines, I should say. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We'll go to motion, or item number 4, I'm sorry, which is the $130,000 appropriation from the sewer fund contingency related to the demolition of the Blatchley Pump Station.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Further discussion from what we had? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I do need a very brief executive session for real estate.
Okay. I forget, do we need a motion moving to? I should know this after 11 years.
Motion to adjourn into executive
All right,
session,
motion-
involving the press and
All
public,
right.
including the manager and the director.
All right,
So moved.
I was going to say
all
so
right.
moved.
Thank you. We're good. Okay.
Ladies.
You
You're
have to
out.
go. Yes. Yeah, you have to go.
Thank you.
It's going to be a very, very brief one.